Hello, and welcome to the first and inaugural podcast for the City of Middletown. I'm Byron McCauley, and I am what am I? What am I, Lisha?
Wow, you wear many hats, but
yes,
today you're the communications
I'm the
manager.
communications manager for the City of Middletown, and I'm really excited about this first podcast because today we have a special program, and I think it's going to be amazing. It's going to be fabulous. And it involves manufacturing, which is the bread and butter of the City of Middletown, has been for so long. And so happy to have with me Miss Lisha Morlan.
Thank you.
Who is the Assistant Director of Economic Development for the City of Middletown. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. This is exciting, being our first kickoff to the podcast series.
It absolutely is.
I love it.
And I couldn't think of a better person to kick this off.
Oh, I could think of plenty.
Well, maybe, but right now with you and your department, you have so much going on.
We do.
It keeps me busy because, and that's great for my job security.
Yes.
But you guys have so much going on around economic development in this town.
We do.
And what I hope to do today is just kind of encapsulate a lot of the things that are happening, and then maybe share some pretty exciting news as well that's happening here in the next few days. We're on the heels of something, so we're teasing that, but. First, can you introduce yourself and tell the city and our listeners and viewers about what you've been doing here for a year, that it's almost 1 full year that you've been here.
We're at the 1 year mark. Lisha Morlan, Assistant Director of Economic Development for the City of Middletown. In my previous roles, I have always been involved in economic development, even though it may not have been part of my official title. So I've got a background in, jumping from corporate America into small business. I've owned a portfolio of businesses of various sizes and industries. So, it started with one, and then we just sort of grew the portfolio to 6 companies at one time. So it was very exciting. And then after that, I went into business advising, business strategist, and worked with companies of all sizes in various industries. So it's, when you look at economic development, it touches every facet of a city. So whether it's big business or small business, the world of economic development has changed and morphed from what it used to be.
Right.
It used to be that folks kind of thought of it as just real estate. You're going to put a store here or a restaurant here, but as a town grows, there's growing pains, right? You have to plan for that growth. So much like you do with your own family when you're growing a family. So, is there road infrastructure? Is there utility infrastructure? Do we have sites available that would be attractive to different types of businesses and different industries? But part of that really goes back to what's your city personality? Ours is a manufacturing community. We have other businesses and other industries here, but primarily, and especially when you look at our history, it's manufacturing. So embracing that and preparing for growth in manufacturing is huge, and it's exciting, and it's never going away.
You said something really interesting. You talked about a city's personality. And I've heard you say, very recently, you've been sort of around the region talking about economic development. And I heard you ask a whole group of folks who were pretty influential people around the region, but you asked them, did you know questions, right?
Yes.
I really was elated and enlightened when you talked about that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because that goes with the city's character, right?
Yes.
The did you know questions.
Yes.
Share a couple of those and talk about that.
Thank you. So did you know questions? I've always thought of those as it's a way of sharing information, but it's a way of engaging who you're sharing that information with. And it's sort of like fun fact or little bits of trivia. there's a lot of thoughts about Middletown, whether it's based on history or it's based on recent events. But to really share the nuances of our city, I like to ask those, did you know? And I think, one of the things that I asked at the event that you're talking about is about our airport. Did you know that Middletown has an airport?
That's right.
I would say probably about half the room, because there were 75
There were 75
plus people.
And it was really, again, very influential.
It was.
People who were looking to take action
Yes.
on their businesses and grow their businesses and grow their economies.
Yep. And they were, about half of them were familiar with Middletown. The other half were not. And then I asked some more specific questions about the airport. Do you know how large of an aircraft it can accommodate? Did you know that we have this, or did you know that we have that? I did ask, how did Middletown get its name?
Yes.
And I had several people say it was based on location, because we're between Cincinnati and Dayton. So meet in the middle is one of our hashtags. That's
sort of the obvious one.
It is.
Correct?
It is. And that's not how we got our name. But I love that story. So I'd rather stick with that one.
Yeah, it seems like it's a better story.
Yeah. I mean, it was John Vale founded Middletown, and he moved here from Middletown, New Jersey. And so he gave it the name Middletown.
New Jersey?
It's not as exciting as saying we're in the middle and that's how we got our name.
Sure.
But we are in the middle.
Well, I found that. So what was the answer, by the way, to that, the size of plane that we can land in the at the airport?
It's interesting. It's a 737, but there's a certain type of 737. If it's dry pavement, the only 737 that it cannot accommodate if it's wet pavement is, I believe it's a 737-800. Don't quote me on that because I don't have it in front of me right now. But as long as it's dry pavement, it will accommodate, and has accommodated a 737. Would we want to do that on a continuous basis? Not right now, right? We have some infrastructure improvements we would have to do to accommodate that. But we have, and we will continue to do so. We have, quite a few private planes that come in that are quite sizable. We had some military planes land at our airport over the weekend in observant of the Miami football game. So that's kind of neat, and it's something that gives us some uniqueness that other airports don't necessarily have. And we are out of the congested airspace of the Cincinnati and the Dayton international airports.
Wonderful.
So we've got some opportunities there that we're looking into.
Who knew that the economic development director would know the difference between dry pavement and wet pavement? You have to you have to get up really early in the morning to be sharper than
I
Lisha
rely on our
Morlan.
airport manager, Joe Dybel, who is fantastic, and she's doing a lot of great things out there, and I love having her on the team. It allows me to do other things when she shares knowledge about airport operations with me. So
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm Byron McCauley, Communications Manager of the City of Middletown, and we are here with Lisha Morlan, the Assistant Economic Development Director of our fair city. And one thing that we talked about earlier that I really want you to sort of update us on. Now, here in a few days from now, you are planning something called the Forging Tomorrow. It's a manufacturing forum that talks about our bread and butter in Middletown, which is manufacturing.
Yes.
But it's not the manufacturing that your dad grew up with.
Right. Well, and it's interesting. That's a sort of one of those did you know moments, right? So when I talk about manufacturing, I like to ask folks, what do you think of when you hear the word manufacturing? What conjures up in your mind? And a lot of times it's as you just alluded to, when my dad grew up, it's that dirty, hardworking, not temperature controlled environment. And
big manly muscle man factories, right?
And while you still have some of those, depending on the sector, you also have very clean environments, so if they're doing injection molding, if they're doing manufacturing for food products, if they're doing manufacturing for pharmaceuticals, So a lot of those are clean environments. We even have some metal types of manufacturing, certain sectors that are clean environments. So, the connotation that used to come up when you would say manufacturing is a little bit different now, because we've
Right.
had that sort of that evolution. And when you look at the title of our manufacturing forum, Forging Tomorrow, it will continue to evolve. And as we start to bring technology more and more into the manufacturing space, that tomorrow looks very different, whether it's short term or long term.
I am so glad you mentioned technology, because when we think of manufacturing, we don't always think of technology driven,
Right.
right? And it's manufacturing these days. It sort of takes a back seat from a sort of, business sexiness level, right?
Right.
Everybody looks at IT and AI and all that. But really, when you think about manufacturing, that has all of that and
It does.
more.
It does.
One of the things that you've talked about a lot, and that really intrigues me as a dad, people who need to go to work, but need a place for their kids to be. And we just had some federal monies that sort of dried up around emergency help during COVID, where families were getting some relief for their daycare situation.
Yeah.
But companies are going to have to think differently about their workforce and their needs.
Yes. It's, there's not a city or a municipality across this entire country that doesn't have workforce challenges. And there's a myriad of things that go into what is creating the workforce challenge, right? Whether it's, we read about it. You can pick up any news line and read about it. It's the baby boomers are retiring, and Gen Z is coming in, and what they're looking for is a little bit different. And when I hear employers say, "I have all these job postings and nobody wants to work," that's inaccurate. They want to work. They just don't want to work for you, right? They don't want to work for you because you have not made the changes in your organization that is a better fit or balance to the needs of that incoming workforce.
Right.
So whether it's a generation thing, or it's a where you are in life thing, I say we, sort of the collective we as a society, we are putting a lot of resources, focus, attention, time, money into programming and development of our younger generations, the workforce, whether it's the STEAM and STEM students, or it's the students that want to get a skilled trade. And those are important, and we need them to fill the pipeline. But there is a huge untapped employee candidate pool, which is our regardless of how we want to term it, because I've heard so many different terminologies, second chance hiring, fair chance employment. But the other part of that, and we'll talk about that in a second, the other part to that, what workers need, what's filling the workforce gap, is childcare. Family is important. And when we go to work, we spend more time with our work family than we do our home family every day.
That's right.
Wouldn't it be nice if we were able to have our children with us during our commute times, right? To work, from work. If we were able to pop in and have lunch with our child, or just check in on them. Maybe they know we're there, or maybe they don't. But sort of circa 1970s, I'm going to date myself a little bit now. Your larger employers had on-site childcare. And if you worked for an employer who had on-site childcare, your work history had a different level of credibility to it. And then we get away from that, and sort of the circa late 80s, early 90s come around, and we have franchised models of childcare, varying levels of what they offer. And that's important too. But now it's sort of like, it's good for history to repeat itself in a way. As an economic development professional, if I can somehow create an incentive for my employers here within this municipality to provide childcare in some way to their employees as a perk, whether it's on-site, whether it's a consortium of employers that if they're in close geographic proximity, they can 2 or 3 or 4 can support an employer-supported childcare for their workers, or they provide a stipend, in whatever way that is. If we can create an incentive as an economic development professional, that is a business retention and attraction tool.
Absolutely.
But it also is an employee retention and attraction tool to the employers.
Right.
So being able to offer that becomes part of that doing something different, right? It's not something that's done a lot right now. There are some that have made that change. We're going to have some of those speakers at our forum.
Yes.
Both the employers that are doing it and the ones who work with employers to do it. And it's just sort of one of those, the sort of shopping list of things that employers can do for their workforce that is a little bit different. I can pay Bob maybe $35 an hour instead of $40 an hour if I help provide childcare in some way for his child.
Right.
The chances of Bob leaving to go somewhere else for a quarter more per hour are less likely.
Right. That's exactly right. It's that it feels like an intangible. We used to call it an intangible benefit.
Yes.
But really, I don't think it's intangible anymore.
I tell you what, there's a lot of facets to it.
Yeah, it is.
And it's taking care of the families of the employees, and when employees feel like they are getting support and taking care of their families, they are less likely to leave. Right. They feel more engaged and valued.
And frankly, they're more productive.
They are more productive.
Because they feel supported.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You mentioned one thing, and you can briefly address this, but when we talk about second chance hiring, that's a big deal.
It is.
Because of a shrinking workforce. That's a whole other workforce that's out there that really we've overlooked.
Truly overlooked.
And it takes... You can talk to me about it, but it takes a kind of a restructuring when you think about your hiring practices, your culture, your HR departments.
Yes. Like I said, it's a huge untapped employee candidate pool. And a lot of those folks had a skill or a trade prior to being incarcerated, or they gained the skill or maybe a certification while being incarcerated. And part of that, when you hire someone who is a re-entry employee, it has to be an intentional strategy. It can't just be, well, I'm going to hire Susie and John and say that I'm part of the, fulfilling the diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is an intentional strategy. And to your point, there has to be changes in the vetting, the recruiting, the onboarding, and as well to help your current workforce acclimate to the new members.
That's right.
And, if it's part of the mission and part of the culture, then it's a much easier thing to adapt. It's more palatable.
It is. You are Lisha Morlan, Assistant Director of Economic Development for the City of Middletown. It's very exciting for you to be here. We are really thankful that you're here as a successful entrepreneur with all the experience that you sort of bring to the table here.
Thank you.
So knowing what you know and the things that you've come through and bringing your sort of innovative kind of thinking, I think the city is very fortunate, frankly, to have you on board. And it's great. Again, it keeps my job security up. So that's
we
wonderful.
got to keep you around.
Right. Well, I hope so. There's one more thing, but I do want to take a moment to talk about, because some people will hear this prior to the manufacturing forum, but some will hear it after. So just to take a moment, it is October 26th.
This Thursday, October 26th.
And it's going to be held at Miami Middletown, which is part of their Miami Regionals.
Yes, Miami
colleges.
Regionals campus.
This is a fantastic campus.
Yes.
Starting at 8 a.m. ending at around
12:30.
12:30.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
I mean,
good.
folks can stay after and
Mhm.
network and ask
Mhm.
questions and have
Sure.
conversation. But yeah, it's 8
Absolutely.
to 12:30 is sort of the identified time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's good. I hope people can come out because
Thank you.
it's
I do
really
too.
something that people, I think, businesses and just citizens who are interested
Yeah.
can come out. Is there a fee, by the way?
There is. So it's $50 for single. If multiple employees are coming from the same company, there is a discount for multiples. We have reached beyond our municipal borders to manufacturers and those who are in some way related or have a hand in the manufacturing industry. They could be a supplier or what have you. Because what we're talking about at our forum is not just specific to Middletown. And in economic development, we need to collaborate across borders. It used to be you sort of just played in your own sandbox and, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing and you don't tell me what you're doing. And, we don't poach each other's. The thought is we're not supposed to poach each other's employers, but there's not one municipality that can provide all the housing, all the jobs, all the employers. So we have to collaborate in economic development to be able to support our employers and to support our workforce. So I have reached out to our sister cities that surround our borders to say, hey, come to this, right? You're invited, come to this, because what we're talking about, this is sort of the game changer, right? When I approached this idea, there's tons of forums and summits going on around manufacturing, and especially in Southwest Ohio, all of Ohio. Site Selection Magazine just named Ohio number 3 across the US. So there are some things that are happening and getting ready to happen that we have got to be prepared for. And so as I was listening to the Q's and A's, the questions at the end of the panel sessions in these other forums and summits, I started to realize there's sort of this common denominator of what's being asked. And I realized these forums were talking about the what, and what the people are asking is the how. So that's how I created the script and the focus for our forum. We will talk about the what's. If you read down through the topic titles,
yes,
those are the what's, but the panelists that are going to be speaking are talking about the how, because they're either the employers that are already doing it, or they are the companies that work with the employers on how to now go do it. The next step, I always call it a next step after this, is it's kind of like when you lead a horse to water. Are they going to drink? I'm bringing them the water. So there are some next step conversations that are already scheduled with these subject matter experts, that if the decision makers at these manufacturing companies or the executive management, if they're bought into creating the change and initiating the change in their environment to accommodate the additional workforce candidates, and create the environment that fits and supports the lifestyles of those incoming workers, if they're bought in to creating that change, then they sign up for this next step conversation. And that really is a more intimate conversation with the subject matter expert to say, okay, now that we're done with the forum and we've talked about the how, now the how becomes very specific to their environment.
yes.
So we're leading the horses to water.
Yeah.
Are they going to drink?
We'll see.
We'll see.
It looks like they're thirsty.
They are definitely thirsty.
Yes. Well, Lisha, there are so many things I think we can talk about here, and we should do this more because there's a lot happening in Middletown.
So much more
that we can't possibly talk about in this first inaugural show. But we'll come back because I am very excited about the new hockey arena. We won't talk about that in detail, but that's coming.
Oh yes, it's coming.
Okay, so that's one thing that we won't get to in this one, but that's something that for another episode.
Yes,
I'm
looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much for being with
Byron.
us.
Yes,
this was awesome, and thank you. And we will be back for the next episode of our new podcast, City of Middletown podcast. And we're looking forward to just having, filling people in on some of the exciting things that are going on around here.
I like it.
All right. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And we will be back.
Okay.